Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brock Beard from LastCar.info. Welcome to Behind the Wall for just the conclusion of the Circuit of the Americas event, the Echo Park Grand Prix, which has finally reached its conclusion. I don't know if any of our musically inclined viewers in here get the title of this. I guess we'll explain that a little bit later here. But basically referring to something that just never seems to end. It's always back to the beginning again. But congratulations, pending post-race inspection, to our good buddy Tyler Reddick for pulling off his third road course victory and his fourth overall Cup Series victory in barely, not even a year really, since his first win at Road America last summer. Had easily one of the two best cars in this race between himself and William Byron. Byron had a good run in this race, spoiled before by running into another car in traffic and stoving in the nose of his car in this one. But again, a fine showing out of both these drivers, and really a nice change of pace this entire weekend without the stage cautions. It's going to be very jarring getting back to Richmond next week and then bringing back the stage cautions. I hope it'll create a more invigorating debate about whether we really do need those or not. In these coming weeks. I think certainly after this race, there were plenty of cautions on hand for anybody that wanted to see a race with just a bunch of crashes and crazy stuff happening. We did seem to reach a point in this event where, you're going to have a caution that just kind of, they always hear the caution breeds cautions deal, and things always going from one moment to the other. And this was definitely a race that produced that. Really, I gotta say, I mean, my feelings over this entire weekend are pretty positive, honestly, about this. I think there's still a lot that needs to be worked out on a technical standpoint with the broadcast, but even on the broadcast, much more on the again, the commentary was improved with the kind of a changing cast of characters we saw. Gunther Steiner, and as part of today's Cup broadcast, I thought did a fine job. And then in terms of technical direction, there were some shots that really kind of accentuated really interesting spots on the track. There were a lot of times during this race where you would see cars like kicking up dirt at the exit of the S's and an uphill portion. And when the sun was coming down, and see the dust kick up. Really nice shots. I was a big fan also of the shot in turn number one, where of course you have everything funnel down and you have one of these two kind of triangular corners there with a really tricky apex. I thought it featured that very well to kind of figure out what was happening in one incident or another. There's still a bit of action that was missing that they couldn't keep track of. But in this one here, it really felt like that it was just, there was so much going on that it was hard to capture it, especially with the cars being strung out as much as they were. Again, I think the other thing too was, again, not having the stage cautions and not having those just pointless interviews where they're trying to talk to the driver that just won the stage as if it was any, real major accomplishments. I mean, it kind of made the focus much more on who would actually win the race, which is even more critical of these road courses, because in the past, when we had those stage cautions, drivers would often find themselves in a position where it's like, okay, well, am I going to go for these stage points, or am I going to actually try to go for the win? Am I going to pick this strategy, or am I going to pick a different strategy there? And so luckily we didn't really have that as much of a factor in this. In fact, both stage one and stage two concluded under green in the Cup race here, which was fantastic. So that was really, that was good to see. So, I guess, one of the stages basically restarted under green, so you had that. But again, I think that's still a positive difference from what we've had, certainly in the past, and certainly from how long those cautions could take at a track like this, where it's the longest one on the circuit now, and the laps under caution just take forever, which was much more of a factor at the end of the race when you had a whole series of incidents with cars running over each other, debris falling off, tires blowing out, and it became a bit chaotic at that point. It became very tricky to actually keep track of who was actually having a good run or another. But again, I think that kind of goes back to, what was it? Was it Kyle Busch that was talking about the sense of decorum between the drivers out there, and people just running over each other? I mean, I think part of it is probably a cultural issue there, but part of it probably also is which tracks they run. I think both these triangular corners there, turn one and then the other one at the other end of the track before the straightaway, are just not designed for these kind of cars. I mean, these cars just go through there like bowling balls, and you probably could put any group of drivers out there, and they still probably wouldn't be able to help running over each other. Same thing could be said for turn one of the Indy Grand Prix circuit, where we saw so many incidents happen in the last couple of runnings of that race as well. So, yeah, I think it was there. You know, there were definitely some negatives on here in terms of how many restarts we got. Luckily, it didn't get to the point where fuel mileage was being much of a concern there. But it felt much closer to kind of a traditional road course race. And I'm very excited to see how this plays out when the same lack of stage cautions is going to be played out at Sears Point, which is now going to be the next Cup Series road course coming up in just a little over 2 months from now. So we'll see how all that shakes out. But looking at the race results here again, your race winner, Tyler Reddick, Kyle Busch in the second spot there. Fine showing for him. Looked like he was going to be in the right place at the right time at the finish. Alex Bowman as well, outlasting his Hendrick teammates there at the end. In the third spot, Ross Chastain taking fourth. William Byron falls to fifth at the end. The next to last restart seemed to really cost him there, where he wasn't able to capitalize on getting around the 45 car. Austin Cindric follows up with a promising showing he had in the inaugural race here, where he was running dry tires for a very long period on a damp track. He's always been a driver I think that has been worth watching here at Cota these last couple of years in particular. Ricky Stenhouse with a very surprising seventh spot. Chris Buescher was at the back of the field at the beginning of this and comes back to finish in eighth. Ty Gibbs in ninth, which I believe is his second straight top 10 finish. And Todd Gilliland rounding out the top 10 there. Certainly the Gilliland family, no slouch at the road courses. Father David Gilliland, the runner-up finisher at Sears Point back in 2008. Good to see a good showing out of there. Corey LaJoie, very impressed with an 11th place finish, despite multiple pit road infractions and apparently a real problem with his rear diffuser coming apart. Debris on the track being reported by other drivers. Still comes back and finishes in the 11th spot there. Michael McDowell was on his way to a top 10 finish to join his teammate, Todd Gilliland. Unfortunately gets spun out towards the end of the race, still manages to cover in 12th. Kevin Harvick in 13th. And one driver I really got to give a shout out to, Kyle Larson, had an absolutely disastrous race out there. Got involved in the Bubba Wallace incident that really damaged his car. Then subsequently had another incident where he was trying to get to pit road and ended up getting run over by Denny Hamlin coming in there and spun out again. Then, much later, had the left rear toe link fail and the wheel pointing the wrong way. And in spite of all that, and running 2 laps down in the final laps, those multiple restarts ultimately put him back on the lead lap, and he managed to climb up and finish 14th at the end of this one. Right up there with the fact of, what was it, the 600 or Texas last year, where his car caught on fire and he had all the other problems, and Cliff Daniels was summing it up there. Right up there. I mean, it just shows how important it is to reach the finish, no matter how many extra laps it was. It was 75 laps ultimately, instead of the scheduled 68 laps that we saw for this race. But Larson being able to pull off a top 15 finish, a 14th place run there. Chase Briscoe rounding out your top 15 there at the finish. On the other side of the coin, this was definitely a weekend of very quick last place battles. Pending post-race inspection, Ty Dillon now has his second last place finish of the season, and Spire Motorsports number 77 has finished last at Cota for 2 of these 3 races that have been run here. The other one was the inaugural during the rain, where Justin Haley had a steering issue a couple of years ago. This time, Ty Dillon, the victim very much of circumstance out there. A stack up between turns 19 and 20 resulted in an incident after Brad Keselowski had spun out in the middle of the track. Ty was trying to kind of get around the wreck with everybody else, but he got pinched between both the 38 and the 17. That caused Ty to get hooked in the left rear, spun him directly into the path of Jimmy Johnson, just clobbered him in the right rear, it looked like. Didn't seem like the Johnson had too much damage versus Ty, whose entire nose of his car was crunched in, and he was ultimately leaking oil. But unfortunately, the day was over for Johnson as well. By 3 or 4 laps into the race, he was being pushed behind the wall at that point. And apparently seemed to have a problem with oil leaking as well. There was oil on his rear view camera as NASCAR Drive was showing there during the stage of the race, and ultimately dropped him out at the same time. Was a little bit of contention as to which of these 2 drivers was going to be in last place. The scoring, both on Fox and NASCAR.com's leaderboard, briefly showed the 84 in last. But in both cases, It's always so tricky when you have a situation like this where you have drivers that crash out on the opening lap of this. We got a lot of questions about this on Twitter during the race about the last time this happened. I think of Garrett Smithley and the valve cover issue at Charlotte in 2020, where he had a wreck on the first lap and collected his teammate Joey Gase. Gase ultimately completed a couple more laps before the DVP put him out of the race. You think of 2006 at Sears Point, the big wreck in the S's that ultimately took out Ken Schrader, Tom Hubert, and Sterling Marlin. And then you think about Pocono in 2017 with Matt DiBenedetto and what was it? I think Eric Almirola were involved in that one. A wreck in turn 3. DiBenedetto crossed the line to get to the garage area, and that was a difference. In this case here, both cars were pitted well short of the start-finish line, so we didn't really have a situation like at Pocono where a car completed an extra lap. But Johnson had qualified ahead of Ty Dillon. Dillon was ahead of Johnson when the wreck happened, which is how he was able to kind of get hooked into the 84 car there. But ultimately, it seemed to go back to the starting order, which dropped the 77 to last place there. Although it very easily could have been the 84's first last place run since, I think, 2004, when Kyle Busch was driving the CarQuest car, an extra entry at Hendrick Motorsports back then. I don't believe the 84's finished last since then. Allmendinger came close sometimes there driving for Red Bull. I'm not sure if he ever did, but that would be kind of the time period to look at there. Number doesn't get run that often, honestly, so that's another one to kind of look at there too. But mechanical issues after that with other teams kind of filling out the bottom 5, although Bubba Wallace in the aforementioned incident with Kyle Larson very upset at himself after back-to-back kind of rough weeks. Certainly last week we talked about the Atlanta race, and the racecraft of that modern super speedway has really narrowed the margin of error. If you have any kind of mechanical damage at that track, you get in any kind of a wreck, the draft is going to completely leave you behind, and then once that happens, you're going to lose constant laps. We saw that out of both Bubba Wallace and Ryan Preece last week with their issues there. This time around, Bubba very frustrated after getting involved in this incident. I don't know if the oil leak that he had was the reason that he locked up the brakes there and ran into Larson, or something else was going on, but he was very upset. It certainly brings up discussions of the issues that he's had with depression in the past, or just frustrations. I don't think he's alone in that. I think there's a lot of drivers that have been very emotional, or it's either everything's really, really good or really, really bad. Dale Jr., I believe, mentioned that he felt very much like that in parts of his career. You think of other guys like AJ Foyt going even further back, who were very vocal when they were not happy about things happening. But hopefully, coming up here at Richmond or these other tracks here, things can turn around for them. And certainly the spirits of 2311 buoyed very much by Tyler Reddick pulling off the victory in the other car there. Connor Daly with a mechanical issue. It was reported by NASCAR that it was a transaxle issue, which is interesting. Probably one of the few times that it was actually listed as such. Denny Hamlin famously had that issue where he shifted the wrong gear and it dropped him out of the race. In Daly's case, apparently he had problems with a vibration from the transmission throughout the weekend, and apparently that situation was not fully resolved during the race. Ultimately dropped him out of the field there, and he finished in the 36th spot. Brad Keselowski, who basically kind of started the whole series of events at the end of the race with multiple restarts and pushed this race well past his scheduled distance, completed the bottom 5 there, finishing in the 35th spot there at the same time. But a lot of wrecks there at the end, but a lot of good racing, really, for most of this. A lot of good long green flag runs where, kind of like we talked about last week, kind of hoping we get a situation similar to Sears Point in 2012. Clint Boyer was right to even bring this up during the broadcast today, that in the 2012 race, when you didn't have stage cautions and you had a long 85-lap green flag run to start the race, you still had a very competitive battle between Kurt Busch and Clint Boyer. In fact, again, both of them in the booth today for the Cup Series race. And we saw very much the same thing during a lot of this between William Byron and Tyler Reddick. I don't know exactly what it is about having a race run that long that you just don't have one driver run off and hide, that you have at least 2 cars that are pretty evenly matched, and 2 drivers that are pretty equally skilled at pulling off victory, pulling off a good run here at Cota. But for whatever reason, we did see very much that kind of a race. And even in a short sprint where you would have these restarts, those two drivers would be able to kind of run off on their own and kind of fight each other for the position. I really thought AJ Allmendinger would be kind of in that mix this time after he had the great run at this race last year and, of course, winning the Xfinity race yesterday. But that did not turn out to be the case for him. And you have AJ Allmendinger well back in the results there after one of those incidents in turn one, showing in the 34th position at the end of this one. The road course specialists each had a little bit of their moment in the sun here at the same time. We saw Kimi Räikkönen in the top 10 for a little bit in the Project 91 entry, and that was fun to see. Räikkönen ends up back in the 29th spot there at the finish, the next to last car on the lead lap ahead of Eric Almirola. We saw as well Jordan Taylor flirt with the top 10 there in the number 9 car there, ends up with a series of misfortunes as well that dropped him back in the order, showing him in the 24th spot here. And then, of course, you go to Jenson Button in the number 15 car, best of this particular group here, finishing in the 18th spot for Rick Ware Racing in partnership with Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing. A fine showing there for Jenson and in his Cup Series debut. And good to see a lot of attention brought to these drivers and by the broadcast itself. I think they did a fine job featuring them as much as they will. Even though I'm not really a big fan of those ham-fisted grid walks that Michael Waltrip did, I like that he at least talked to the both of them at the same time there. I think he would have probably got more traction out of Jordan Taylor with his whole Rodney Sandstorm thing, but I think that's just kind of how that turned out there at the same time. But a fine showing for Jenson Button. Good to see. I think that's going to really be a net positive for NASCAR of having these world champions be involved in racing at this particular track. I don't know how this particular track got this much attention for drivers of this caliber, but of course, if you've had IndyCar and Formula One races here, I guess maybe it was only a matter of time. I can only hope that we get similar, drivers from those backgrounds at other races, especially at Sears Point when we're planning on doing our next trackside coverage here in June. I think that's going to be really exciting to find out as we get up to that point. But yeah, I will say though, I think, certainly in terms of the race itself, it's disappointing to have this many restarts. I think it kind of, it just tosses everything up in the air, and you have all these tangles in turn one that just really didn't need to happen. You got a lot of equipment that was torn up that really didn't need to be. It almost feels like it's inevitable that any race that we have is going to end up that way. Of course, I got a good amount of grief for posting about how happy I was that it was a long green flag run, and they were talking about fuel mileage, and AJ Allmendinger was going to be 2 laps short, and they couldn't talk to him on the radio, so trying to cobble together a pit sign there to kind of alert him about that. And it was going to be really interesting to see how that was going to play out. Unfortunately, the series of cautions that happened after where that pretty much prevented that from happening. I'm definitely much more of a fan of a race that's allowed to play out to its natural conclusion, and you have a guy that's able to kind of really capitalize on having a strong run, really rewarded by being able to pull off a victory. There's certainly no guarantee that a guy that dominates a race is going to win it. NASCAR has certainly had more than its share of races that have played out that way, even ones that didn't have, 4 restarts at the end of it to have it play out. But it's particularly this track here, and again, just like Indianapolis, where it has such a treacherous first corner, where everybody just throws all abandon out the window, and you're going to have a big pile up there no matter what, no matter how clean these people could get through there. And then by the end of that lap, after 3 miles around there, they're going to be dropping so much debris, they're going to have to throw a caution again. That gets a bit ridiculous. So I'm not sure what exactly you can do about that. They can't really widen the corner or anything like that, but it's just too bad. So, because I think there was, again, a lot of positives from this one, despite how physical it turned up at the end there. A couple drivers that could have had some good runs that were really kind of flirting with it there. We talked about Michael McDowell. Another one there was certainly Noah Gragson, who was looking like he was about to go for a top 10 here as well, and having a good showing after the run that he had at Atlanta last week. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out for him when he got spun out in one of those incidents in turn one. Seemed like he was going to have a good shot at it there, but unfortunately it didn't shake out for him. Martin Truex is another driver that got dropped out of the top 10 very unceremoniously towards the end of this one here. Truex showing back in the 17th spot, and Noah Gragson back in 20th position there in the final results. But yeah, I mean, the finish of the race was a mess. But yeah, I mean, I would have to say that yeah, but the overall experience I thought was very positive. And I also forgot, really, especially from last year, since the first race was rain shortened, how much of a gauntlet this one is, how long of a race this is for the road courses. You know, it makes me really think back to if you're watching like a really old race at Riverside where they had to do 500 miles out there and it would take all day. This one here, the sun looks like it's very much setting out there, well past 6 o'clock local time there when this race wraps up. So that was kind of interesting to see. But yeah, I thought overall it was a pretty positive experience and really extended to all three of the races this weekend, which was surprising given the fact that both Saturday races had so many Cup Series regulars in both fields. It played out certainly differently from trucks versus Xfinity in that respect, but you had that too. So yeah. Looking back to Saturday, we'll do some trivia here later on tonight. I got something else here for show and tell. We'll definitely be talking about the videos that were posted on the channel this week, not just my video on Rise of the Field fillers on the Nextel Open, and a big thank you to you guys for checking out that video, but also the video on Peter Revson, the life and times of the Formula One driver from America here that NASCAR Man History produced on his channel. And I narrated that video there in conjunction with him there. So, yeah, we'll definitely talk about that on the show here tonight. And, yeah, we'll definitely talk about the Truck Series and Xfinity Series action here as well. Alrighty. So let's go back into Saturday's action here at the same time. Really, again, this was definitely the weekend of early last place finishers, and Saturday was early last place finishers and people making their series debuts, which was unfortunate. You had drivers that weren't quite able to fully enjoy being able to capitalize on these opportunities. In the Truck Series race, the unfortunate last place finisher was Ed Jones, he of the IndyCar Series, the United Arab Emirates, driver who famously finished third in the 2017 Indy 500, past Indy Lights champion. Was going to be very excited to see what he could do in the number 20 truck there. Had a nice paint scheme there with Little Caesars on board. Certainly the team was looking to have a good run after last year. They only completed one lap around this track with Sheldon Creed driving it before the drivetrain failed. But this time around, some kind of freak suspension issue in the back of that truck ultimately led to a flat left rear tire. Truck stranded on the track before he could even complete the first lap of the race. The team spent about half the race really trying to get back out there. Ultimately, they couldn't do so. They ended up having their teammate Spencer Boyd come back there in the garage area and trying to work on his truck and get back out there too. That seemed to be the reason they stopped working on the 20. I don't know if that was the case or not. But Ed Jones, ultimately your last place finisher in this, and finishing last in his debut without completing the opening lap of the race. Suspension issues cited as the reason for that. For a time, it looked like the last place battle was going to come down to Jones and Dean Thompson. Dean had unfortunately had another rough run out there in the Tricon entry, ran to the back of another truck, ruptured the radiator, came into the garage area about 4 laps after Jones's situation. Unfortunately, he was out of the race the moment they pushed the truck behind the wall there. And so it could have been Jones's situation to be complete a couple laps, but unfortunately Jones didn't. So I hope he gets another chance to kind of run a race properly and be able to maybe either, be able to run in the Truck Series or maybe one of these other road course events, in Xfinity or the Cup Series. I think certainly the success of some of the drivers that we saw today in the Cup race will hopefully kind of attract some more attention for drivers of his caliber there as well. But your bottom 5 completed by Carson Hocevar, Matt Crafton, and Spencer Boyd there at the same time. An axle failure for Carson Hocevar on top of a brake failure that put him into the sand trap, dropped him out in the early laps of that one. But congratulations to Zane Smith and to Front Row Motorsports, who remained perfect through the first 3 Truck Series races at Cota. Todd Gilliland winning the inaugural one in the rain, and Zane Smith now winning these last 2 back-to-back, defeating Kyle Busch and the other Cup Series invaders that were in this field here. A fine showing for Zane has again affirmed himself of the ability to, really be one to watch in his future cup races here as he shares the ride with Gilliland in the 38 car, and occasionally we saw him in the 36 at Daytona earlier this season. I think that'll be something that'll be very interesting to see coming up here. Not without its little bit of near disaster there at the end. A burnout there set the rear mud flaps of that truck on fire. Very nearly the truck came to grief there. The equipment folks there were taking their sweet time getting the fire extinguishers out there to put that truck out. Luckily they did. Hopefully they still have a good piece that they can work with there for future road course races, because Zane sure drove the hell out of it there in the race itself. Your second place finisher, again, Kyle Busch, Ty Majeski, Tyler Ankrum, and Ross Chastain, your pole sitter in this one, rounding out the top 5. Cup drivers did not have their way with the victory in that one. Corey Heim, Nick Sanchez, Tanner Gray, Kaz Gralla, and Ben Rhodes rounding out the top 10. Rhodes dropped the drive shaft on the track coming to the finish there. Really in this one, I think it probably more than any of the races, even with all the crashes we saw in the Cup race, I think it was a very arduous race there in the Truck Series, where you had a lot of trucks that were just kind of falling apart, a lot of mechanical issues, a lot of drivers taking long trips on pit road, trying to keep up to pace, a lot of trucks that were beat up at the finish of this one. I think that was very satisfying to see as a long-time road course enthusiast, when you don't have those stage cautions out there. And how many cautions did we ultimately have? We had 3 cautions for just 5 of those 42 laps out there. It was a real slugfest out there, and there was a lot of good racing, and I think it really set the tone for the weekend quite well with a lot of the competitors out there. Unfortunately, again, we did have some issues, mechanical issues there for some of the teams in the back of the pack. Even again, Matt Crafton being mentioned there as well, sliding off course at one point and not being able to recover from that. And also, another part of a road course race, it's allowed to kind of play itself out this way. You certainly have runs that could have certainly been better had it not been for some bad luck. We talk about the problems that Dean Thompson had there. Another one you have to talk about is Dale Quarterly, making his first ever Truck Series start with G2G Racing. We talked a lot about this team last week with Akinori Ogata getting a top 20 run out there with a fine showing that he had during that, especially given how much Ogata has struggled in his first few starts in both trucks and Xfinity. We saw very much the same thing out of Quarterly, working his way into the top 20, trying to get a good run out there. Unfortunately, drops back in the final laps and ends up the next to last car on the lead lap, finishing in the 28th spot. A lot of penalties, a lot of ooh penalties we see here for drivers that are shortcutting the course. In some cases, we had drivers that were where they were even not scoring the driver anymore because they weren't responding to the penalties. Whether or not that was radio issues that we saw a lot of this weekend, especially on the Cup Series side, or some other situation, or just contesting the penalty, still kind of resulted in some drivers falling back in the order in that sense there too. Daniel Dye was getting a lot of screen time during that Truck Series race too, kind of getting a good run for him out of that 43. Ends up finishing back in the 18th spot there. Maybe not the best run that they were going to shoot for, but for a first-year driver, I think that's still something very positive they could look at. Tanner Gray is a driver I've been really impressed by through this season. I know things have been kind of a little hot and cold here with, I believe he was in the one of the early incidents at Atlanta last week. But other than that, has really kind of made that 15 truck his own there for the Tricon Garage effort. And the Toyota backing there has only kind of really helped him, I think, this year. I would love to see him break through and score a victory there. He hasn't scored a victory yet, has he? He's been close. No, he hasn't. He's 75 Truck Series starts here with 8 top 5s. So yeah, still another driver. I mean, I know Carson Hocevar seems to get a lot of the attention of being a Truck Series guy everybody's waiting to see winning their first race. But I put Tanner Gray in that same group there, and he'll be very interesting. Nick Sanchez, after the near miss at Atlanta last week, still gets a top 10 finish out of this. The Rev Racing entry there in the 7th spot there. Tyler Ankrum, mentioned him in the top 5. Good to see him get a good showing out there. Seems like he's been kind of overlooked a little bit with his performances at the Hattori effort there. But hopefully he can kind of get his feet back under him and get some good showings out there. But a very quick last place battle in that one. Ed Jones, again, your last place finisher there. and the first driver from Dubai really to finish last in a NASCAR Top Series event, the Top 3 Series across the board there. So certainly an international component to the articles this week here. We'll talk about the Xfinity Series race here as well. Your last place finisher in that, Carson Hocevar, as mentioned, had a disastrous Saturday after the bottom 5 finish in the Truck Series race. He gets in the SS Greenlight racing car that was vacated by Blaine Perkins. Perkins was off to a terrible start this year. Easily was leading in bottom 5 and bottom 10s of drivers that had not finished last yet this year at Xfinity. If he was in the car here, he would have very easily taken the lead, the last car standings, if things played out the way they did. But he was swapped out of that ride there. Hopefully he gets his feet back under him, running more Truck Series races and everything else that's coming up here in the future. But did not have the same success that we saw at Blaine in the Our Motorsports entry with what was going on here with the daughter effort. But Hocevar continuing that struggle there with the transmission failure. He was running around the 15th spot. At the time, he had just fallen to 16th spot when he dropped out at the beginning of this race here. Ends up finishing back in the 38th position there. And he turned 7 laps, which was by far the most of anybody this weekend. The other 2 last place finishers, of course, not completing a single one of their laps in either one of these races. And a track that's this long, I think that really increases the possibility of such a thing happening. Although we've seen even races at Bristol where a driver like Michael Annett, I think in 2015, didn't finish the opening lap of that race too. So that's one to look at. Austin Hill with a very surprising engine failure, finishing next to last there in the 37th spot. Preston Pardis and the Pardis Racing Incorporated team made the field. Was very excited to see another Pardis running the number 50 car that Dan, of course, ran for the Midwest Transit team in the late 1990s. And they qualified great. 19th spot there for him there. Unfortunately, suspension issues dropped him out very early in the race, just 16 laps in. Sage Karam and Brett Moffitt running at the bottom 5 with a pair of engine failures. And that was the situation there on that side. Among other drivers that really tried to contend for the battle, contend for the lead in this one here. Parker Kligerman ends up back in the 31st spot, dropped to the very back of the field there after just leading 1 lap of that race there. Still got some good stage points out of it there, but surely was expecting a better performance there with his background. Last year in the Emmerling Gase car, he had that team's best runs of the entire season in an unsponsored car, and I think coming into this one, really hoped to have a good finish. Unfortunately, things didn't quite shake out for him right at the end of the race there, too. Brad Perez, good to see him get a lot more attention out there in the 1-year anniversary of his first Truck Series start with the Realm team. He gets over into the Emmerling Gase team where he's been working there. Was seeing him help peel the decals off of Joey Gase's car at Fontana. He gets his first shot in the car there with a beautiful paint job. The Apex Coffee Roasters machine there, 53 car, was really one of the standouts. I think Harris Lou put that one together, but did a fantastic job. Really stood out there. Finishes back in the 29th spot, just on the very outside of a bottom 10 finish there in the running order here at the same time. Ryan Ellis was able to salvage a top 20 finish after getting spun out in turn 1 in the Alpha Prime number 43, so kudos to him. Parker Retzlaff and Anthony Alfredo are continuing their great starts to the season with a pair of top 20 finishes themselves. Brandon Jones finishing in the 11th spot despite losing the left front fender in an incident earlier in the race. But all of these well behind A.J. Allmendinger, who along with William Byron put on very much another great 2-car show. As much as I'm not a fan of Cup guys being in the lower series, they were absolutely throwing blocks and leaning into each other and wearing each other out. Now, is this to say that we couldn't have this from any other drivers up there or series regulars? Certainly not. In fact, I'm sure for anybody that was at the track, you probably had just as good a battles between series regulars for position back there. And if they were running for the lead instead of, maybe 5th and 6th or something, they probably would have put on just as good a show as any of these guys. But regardless, Allmendinger seemed to be setting course for a fine showing today. Unfortunately, did not play out that way. But Allmendinger wins the Cota race in the Xfinity Series side a second straight year and pulls off the victory there. William Byron in second. Ty Gibbs in third in his first Xfinity start since his Xfinity Championship clinching race last year. So he had a fine weekend, top 10s in both Xfinity and Cup. again, pending post-race inspection on the Cup Series side. Sammy Smith in 4th, Justin Allgaier 5th, Daniel Hemrick in the 6th spot, Sam Mayer in 7th, Josh Berry in 8th, Sheldon Creed in 9th, and Riley Herbst in 10th. We have to talk about Sheldon Creed. We talked about the fact that he was last place finisher in the Truck Series race at Cota last year. Not really a driver that I would typically think of being really good at the road courses. You think about last year at Darlington, where he very nearly pulled off the win in that race there, only for a Cup Series regular to drive right through him and cost him the victory at the end of the day, and ultimately costing him a spot in the playoffs. Now, this time around, Sheldon Creed has, I would say, easily his best Xfinity run to date. He led 16 laps, second only to your race winner in AJ Allmendinger. Was able to both work his way back and forth through the field, get spots back, even if he lost any on pit road or just an incident on track. Was doing a fine job out there. Ultimately gets driven through at the end by another Cup regular and finishes back over in the 9th spot. He has every right to be furious, as Allmendinger himself mentioned in his post-race interview. But he handled it very maturely, I would have to say. Much more so than I would have under the same circumstances. But Creed, I think, put on a great show out there. And especially on a day where his teammate Austin Hill had mechanical issues and dropped out in the early laps, it gave him even more attention from the Childress group. And I think really kind of vouched for what they hired him to do and bringing him on that team and getting the good runs that he can get. So hopefully, as he looks forward there in the Wheelan injury, looking for his first Xfinity victory as well, now in his 43rd series start, according to the statistics here as well. But real heartbreaker for him. But I think the series is still in great shape here with a lot of these drivers that are just absolutely pounding on the door. Now that you got Sammy Smith with his first win at Phoenix, it seems like it's only a matter of time to get guys like Chandler Smith and Sheldon Creed getting their wins. And then, of course, Austin Hill showing that he's not just a super speedway guy and actually winning that race at Vegas. I think he's going to be very strong the rest of the season, too. So I'm going to be very excited to see what they do. And then, of course, Sears Point's going to be part of their schedule, too, for the first time this year. And I think it's a great year for us to have that because we're going to have a very good group out there. And that's before we even know if we get any other road course drivers out there. I hope Preston makes a showing there with his team. I'd love to be able to see that team operate personally and talk with him. I've never met Preston face-to-face, so I'd love to actually be able to interview him in one of these races. I know he always does Road America, where William Saki's been covering the action out there in the Midwest, but that would be one that I'd love to make sure to kind of see what's happening there at the same time. Looking at other drivers, Jeb Burton seemed like he was up there for a bit as well. Ended up having what was it? He had a cutting the course penalty, didn't he, at the end, or a spin? Real unfortunate they're dropping at 21st. Oh no, that's right. He was the one that we had the incident at the very last lap of the race. Gosh, almost forgot about this one, and just like Fox did. So he had the incident coming off the last corner of the race, and Brad Keselowski notices it in the booth. And nobody says anything. We don't get anything from the announcer saying, "Oh yeah, Jeb Burton was spun out on the last corner and he lost all these spots." Nope, that just got completely ignored. Thank God Chris Knight was tweeting about it there and being able to talk about what on earth happened there. And you just see in the meantime, Jeb's name slipped down further down the lineup there and then out of the top 20, and just not knowing what happened. So much can happen behind the race leader at these tracks, even after the race is over with. I know it's very, you're very eager at the end of this to just celebrate the win and start thinking in your mind about how you're going to describe the story of this race winner. But especially at a track like this long, the race is just getting started for everybody behind him there. Whoever's like running 15th could be half a lap behind, especially without the stage cautions out there. And so this situation, I don't know why it was overlooked so completely. I don't know why there wasn't any natural curiosity about what on earth was going on. But that's just kind of how it played out there. But unfortunate situation there, and also unfortunate for Jeb himself, for being denied, what was he, about 9th or 10th before he got spun out. Then he ends up dropping back to 21st in the order. Just ridiculous at the same time. But again, some fine runs out of other drivers up there. Sam Mayer came back from a spin at one point to finish in the 7th spot there. Alex Labay driving in for Josh Williams in this one-off here this week. Had a good showing. Seemed like both the DGM cars, or at least two of them, between the 92 and the 91 of Balicki, had some kind of problems with fuel pickup and other mechanical issues that dropped them back in the order. Otherwise, they would have had an even better showing than they did. But they got a deep roster over there on the Gosselin team. That's good to see. John Hunter Nemechek has the first real hiccup of his season this year on the Xfinity side. Kind of reminds me of the role Sears Points had in the Cup Series schedule. But John Hunter falls back to the 27th spot there, not for lack of effort. He was up there battling with the leaders at different points of this race, but ultimately in the final stretch run there, drops well back in the order there at the exact same time there too. Other drivers you got to give kudos to. Josh Berry stoved in the nose of his car at the very start there, running the back of William Byron, still comes back and finishes the 8th spot. Again, Barry's not a driver I would think for road courses, especially when he was swapped out for Jordan Taylor there in the number 9 car there for Hendrick Motorsports. But Barry very much showing that he's at least capable of getting top 10s out there in that equipment. So certainly good to see. Although, again, I think Jordan Taylor was a fantastic pickup for the Hendrick Motorsports team. You could tell just through his swagger, Jordan's social media posts and everything, him recording a new voicemail message on his phone and everything. He was ready to go. I was hoping we'd see something like Ron Fellows in 2003 at Sears Point, or something of that nature there in terms of his performance. And we saw a bit of that, certainly in qualifying, with the great run that Jordan had in the Cup Series race there. Unfortunately, got banged around as much as any of the other drivers were at the same time. But they certainly didn't show any favoritism out there, the way that all played out. But that was something interesting to see at the same time. Ryan Sieg was up front briefly there in that race there for the Xfinity Series. Ultimately got shuffled back to the 23rd spot there. Eric Almirola was running the Xfinity race as well as the Cup race. Had flat-spotted tires in the Cup race that dropped him to the very back of the field for the start of that event. But then in the Xfinity Series side, got spun out or had an issue there at the very beginning of that race there and dropped him to last place. Was able to kind of climb back up there to the 24th spot. Certainly a driver is getting a bit more attention after he ran so well as he did at Atlanta last week. Hopefully looking to kind of punch his ticket in the playoffs this year with a victory later this season. Let's see here. Let me kind of check this out too. All right. Really liked that they had what they had with the NASCAR drive cameras here, like seeing the onboard cameras for the entire field. I was very pleased with how much of the track you could see. For somebody like myself that hasn't actually been to this track before, it really kind of helped me kind of get my bearings. I was interested when Bubba Wallace or Connor Daly went behind the wall. They would kind of show like the infield, and you kind of see where the media center and the garage area is. I've had concerns about covering events at this track because you have that massive building that kind of blocks your view of the front straightaway. But the advantage is it looks like it's very easy to get to pit road. They make it very easy to get there. And I know that's based off just the Formula One model of, having these different garages and the cars coming in and out that way during practice sessions, which is very different from, of course, the way NASCAR races are operated here these days. I was worried about it be something similar to Fontana, where you have that long building there that kind of separates you off from pit road, and you wouldn't be able to really see what's happening if you're working in the garage area at all. But I was really pleased, and big thanks to a number of people that were providing additional information for the track, including Jared Haas, provided some fantastic photos there of what was going on in the garage area this weekend. Made everything look like it was very accessible back there, which is good to see. I guess it's probably less surprising for such a modern track and such a purpose-built facility. But this is a race that I wouldn't rule out covering one of these days. I think it would be very interesting, especially when you get all three of the series there, and so much can happen in such a short period of time, too. So we'll see what happens there. Bowser Jr. XD, thank you for the super chat there as well. Xfinity race was the closest finish ever at Cota. So there you go. So some close finishes there at the exact same time, too. Oh goodness, thank you as well, Beast of Metal. Thank you for your super chat at the same time. It's ironic because I think the lower races were under caution at the end of all the stages, seemingly out of spite for the change. But the caution that ended stage 2 in trucks had a massive impact because it wasn't guaranteed. Very good point. Very good point. If memory serves, wasn't that the one that kind of messed Kyle Busch up there at the end of that? Like he was going to win, and then he got kind of caught. Again, Ron Fellows 2003 was the same thing. You're trying to gamble on the cautions coming out a certain way, and then you're leading, but you're going to have to pit under that caution. You're going to give up all that track position. It was interesting to see it play out that way. And that's very true because again, it really shows. I think that's actually even more of a point in favor of not even having these stage cautions, not just at road courses, but anywhere, because you're probably going to have cautions naturally fall at those points. I seriously doubt you're going to get rid of stage cautions and then suddenly all the races are going to be going, green flag the entire way. Certainly not with the drivers being as aggressive as they've been. I think that's going to really still be kind of the model for the sport. I mean, there's just too many reasons these drivers have to drive way over their heads, which is a whole separate problem. I think the combination of the playoffs, the charters, just the money that's involved. Maybe that's always been there in one way or the other. And this is the way it's manifested now. But I don't think we're going to see too many races where if you didn't have the stages, it's going to go, green the entire way. It just seems like at the end, either a car starts falling apart or somebody just gets impatient and starts, knocking somebody out of the way, especially if you get to a track like Bristol or something like that, where, it's you've had caution-free races before, but not in decades. So that's going to be kind of the other way to kind of look at it there too. Zach G, you raise a good point here too about the wrecked cars pulling off the track. That's another limitation to the track, or maybe just to the officiating that I was wondering about. Where were the access roads on this track? Is it just designed in such a way that there's really no way to pull off the course? I could have sworn that in the first race here, when you had the big wreck between Truex and Custer, that where they collided was near an opening in the track, and you actually had a spot where a car could pull behind the wall and get out of the way. It really seemed like in all three races, and especially the Cup race, that nobody could get out of the way unless they were actually all the way down to the start to the pit road, which itself has a pretty treacherous entrance to pit road because it's kind of banked upwards and it's such a narrow line that gets you in there. With these cars handling so badly and then handling even worse when they get involved in an incident, it just seems like that's just kind of made for, it kind of creates a situation like this. And especially if you're going to have a wreck in the first corner, you got to have at least some runoff before you get to the S's, or maybe over in turn one, or maybe another one at the very far end, like over the that other kind of triangular corner at the other end of the track, something like that. I'm sure this place has access roads or access paths that people can pull off in. I just don't know why they weren't being used. I don't know if that was just something that they instructed people during the drivers' meeting, just said, look, if you have a problem, just try to, above all, fight your way all the way back to pit road, because that's basically the way everybody was kind of playing it during this race, which I thought was kind of bizarre. So I don't know. I don't know. It's a good point. Let's see here. I'm kind of checking you guys' comments here at the same time. I'm glad you guys like the shirt too. I definitely had to pick this one up. Congratulations again to Kirk Shelmerdine on being the first member of the Rise of the Field Fillers group to be brought into the NASCAR Hall of Fame. Certainly definitely wanted to fly the colors here, especially with the series back up there. We'll get into a discussion on that very soon here too. Yeah, why don't they just get rid of the stage cautions? Yeah, I agree. I'm just looking at some of these other ones here at the same time. Thank you, Joseph Gooch. I'm glad you enjoyed the Lost Stories of the Daytona 500. I do have more work on 500 days that I've been completing this weekend as well. It's been great these last couple of days here. I've been able to kind of get back going here and finally get some stuff posted I've been meaning to get up. I guess we can go ahead and jump into that now anyway. The Rise of the Field Fillers thing, again, I'm overwhelmed by the response to this. I'm also very pleased that it seems like it's encouraged people to check out other videos on this channel. I've been starting to kind of get more comments on 500 Days and the Why Jerry Nadeau was awesome and some of these other videos on the channel. So I'm glad that that's helping out there. This was an episode I've had in my mind pretty much since I started making these episodes back in 2020. And it was the reason that I basically had those first episodes in the order they were. was I wanted to kind of introduce all these different teams that were field fillers, especially that ran the first 11 races, and then do the Nextel Open episode where we got to kind of revisit all of them and describe what their experiences were in this race. And it was also the same reason that I took as long as I did trying to get the Stanton Barrett one done, because I knew there was going to be one that was going to be a sticking point. I didn't think it was going to be that one. Although I felt like it was going to be kind of a situation where, it was like one of the first episodes where I didn't really know much about the team going into the race. Wow, my goodness. I see the iceberg raid thing here too. Thank you thank you to the iceberg, and thank you to those of you tuning into the show tonight. We're over 100 people here tonight, so we're up to 125. So thank you very much as well. But just talking about the Rise of the Field Fillers episode, kind of getting the beginning of a discussion on that. This was an episode I was very excited to do. Brian Holman provided some fantastic pictures of the entire field, so I had to do the starting grid element for sure, and I'm glad that came together. And then also I found a lot of quotes on and information on these different teams that didn't make it into those old episodes, and this was a good framework to kind of catch up on all of those and bring those in. Again, I didn't think the WW Motorsports team was going to be a hold up there. I didn't think that was going to be one that was going to be kind of an issue, but I will admit that, it was a team I knew the least about. And Stanton Barrett, I probably had the least amount of information on his own career besides just straight statistics. And in our last conversation, that was really kind of the last indication. He gave me some really interesting information, and I just had even more questions. Unfortunately, he's just so busy that we just haven't been able to meet up on that. Hopefully we will. That's why I made this one episode 10.5. I'm going to just basically put episode 10 on the back burner now. One of these days, I'd still like to get it done. Maybe at some point or another, it'll just either come together, or we have a good interview or something like that, and we can kind of finish it up. I think he's he's a very down to earth guy for all the remarkable experiences he's had in his life as both a stunt man and a race car driver. And it may well be that there's too much information for even a Field Fillers episode. Maybe it ends up being a two-parter like the Carl Long one. But I'm going to leave kind of that placeholder in there in case we get back to that again, which is why I still left in the mentions of the 94 team in the Field Fillers episode too. So that was a lot of fun. But I really enjoyed that one, and I wanted to kind of do that too. And also kind of 500 Days kind of prepared me for it, because I wanted to also have that aspect where I'm kind of doing a play-by-play of the open race and trying to pick apart what was happening with the Field Fillers, because of course they weren't the primary focus. You still had 3 or 4 guys out there that survived that big wreck that were a big focus of that race and that we're going to get talked about. But really you could see, because the coverage was good from that, you could see what was happening with these other teams out there. And I want to kind of bring that into focus. So that was a lot of fun. It really was always intended to be kind of a special episode, rather than a standalone on any one team like we've had to this point. But I really enjoyed putting that together, and I had a lot of fun making it, and I hope that came across. I think it did from a lot of the discussions there, too. So I do appreciate you guys checking that one out. As it happens, for those of you, I've already mentioned this on the Patreon, so I feel at liberty to bring it up here. The next episode on Rise of the Field Fillers is going to be on Mach 1 Incorporated, also known as the number 98 team that was shown at the very end of that video. That one, I don't believe we're going to have the same problem as the Barrett video, because I've already completed the interview for it. I'll go ahead and say it. I already mentioned it to the Patreon. Larry Gunselman was very nice to speak to me last Wednesday. We spoke for about 2 hours, which, to put in perspective, was about the same length as the Andy Belmont interview in 2020, and that really made that episode, I thought, one of the strongest in the series. I'm hopeful that this is going to make this episode very good. We already have the pictures from Brian Hallman. He provided many great pictures from that team, as well as Gunselman's history in the sport. And so that's going to be a big focus on that. That's going to be the next episode. So episode 11, not episode 10, is going to be very much in the works. And that's one of the projects I have going here. Also, you're not going to have to wait that long for another video to be on the channel, because those of you who are in the Patreon level, $5 and up, and again, big thanks to you guys as well, you already had advanced access to the Field Fillers episode, and you already currently have access to the next video I'm going to be posting on the channel this next Friday. And this is going to be a follow-up to a story of Bob Schacht, which was the driver I talked about in both field fillers and the Daytona 500 this year, with Ty Dillon finishing last in both his 150-mile qualifier and the 500 itself. This is going to be a much shorter video. I'm experimenting with some short-form content, which will almost not exclusively, but primarily focus on what happened with his run in the 1992 Daytona 500. I think it'll accompany the story of Mike Potter quite well with the profile it did on him last year. So that'll be the next video that's coming up here. Again, if you're in the $5 and up level, you already have advanced access to that, and you can watch it after the show tonight, patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock. For those of you who are the $1 and up level, I hope you enjoyed advanced access to the Peter Revson video that NASCAR Man did as well. I think that's personally one of the best videos that NASCAR Man's put together. I think it's right up there with his video on Dan Weldon and the deep dive into the 2011 Las Vegas race. I think those are two of his best videos he's put together. I thought it was very cinematic what he did in there. I thought he handled this subject very respectfully. And I hope he doesn't mind me in saying this, that apparently a member of the Revson family actually contacted NASCAR Man and thanked him for putting the video out there and really kind of clearing up a lot of the misconceptions about Peter Revson, that he wasn't some playboy that wasn't taking racing seriously, that he was a hard worker out there and made his own way and ultimately had to scrap together what he could on his own talents. And I thought that that was really something that he captured very well. And I'd have to agree. I thought he did a fantastic job. I didn't know hardly anything about him because I don't follow Formula One that closely. But I thought he did a very good job, very respectful job on a very challenging topic where in some cases maybe, it's hard to kind of separate the fact from fiction on it. But I thought he did a very good job on it. And if you haven't seen it yet, a video is called Revson, Revson. It does show up on NASCAR Man History's channel there. Good follow-up, I think, as well, if you haven't seen it yet, certainly for after seeing a lot of the Formula One influence from this weekend's action there as well. So definitely recommend that at the same time. Thank you so much. Oh, goodness. Yeah, we're almost up to 50 likes. Well, thank you very much on that. That's the other goal we have for the channel here, too. We're hoping to get to 25,000 subscribers on the channel. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, we're hoping to do that. I don't like usually mentioning that, but I notice a lot of the other channels out there that are very successful do that. So I'm gonna have to start doing that. So hey, we're marching towards 25,000. That's what we're aiming towards. We're getting close. I think we're right up against 18,000 right now. So we made some great progress this past year. But I guess we're still kind of the smaller fish in the pond, but we're getting there too. So I think that's very exciting at the same point there at the same time. So we'll go from there. So we'll do some trivia questions here. I see No Tires Just Gas is excited for that too, and hope you guys from the Iceberg group will enjoy that at the same time. We'll jump into that. If you guys have any other questions from the racing action this weekend that I have not covered or anything else you'd like me to discuss, definitely mention it in the chat, and we'll do that at the same time here. So again, we're bringing out the late 90s Trivial Pursuit deal here, and we'll do some questions here to kind of wrap up the show for this evening. The categories, once again, and these are late 90s questions, so they may have kind of out-of-date answers, but that's kind of part of the challenge there too. Drivers, so you've got NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. So once again, NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Those are your categories for that one there as well. So again, stay tuned on that. Another thing I didn't mention, I already know I overlooked here and talk about the Nextel Open video. I could tell a lot of people got a real kick out of that pizza story that Andy Belmont had. As you can tell, I did save that, of course, from it wasn't actually part of the Andy Belmont video, anything that mentioned the All-Star race, and we had a good long conversation about just that race itself. I definitely wanted to save that and just have that be kind of the featured interview for this episode, and I'm glad I did because I think that really made that a lot of fun. Him describing racing Andy Hillenberg. I would have loved to get Hillenberg's side of it there, but unfortunately Hillenberg declined to be interviewed for the series. But I certainly respect that. But Belmont did a great job bringing that up there. I'm not sure if he's seen the episode yet. I still need to share the link with him if he hasn't. But I really thought that was a real kick out of that. Talking about the fact that, yeah, it just really shows the kind of races that are happening that you just never hear about and you wouldn't know about unless you really talk to the people themselves. And I think that's really important. So, and I have another project that I'm actually working on here too. That's going to be very much of that similar tone, just kind of something that kind of happened in plain sight. And maybe there's a lot of coverage of, but just not as much coverage given to it is kind of going to be the focus there too. So yeah. Alrighty. Okay, good. I'm seeing we do have some music majors here that are enjoying the caption. Yeah. So yeah. So now again, and I'm a bit rusty on this. It's been a long time since I've been in the marching band, and about as long since I played the piano. But I know that the DCL Cota, usually spelled CODA, I believe that's the one where you're playing the music and then the symbol comes up, the circle with the zodiac symbol shows up, and at that point you got to go back to the beginning, play up to that mark, and then when you get to that mark, there's like a whole other part of the song you got to play on the bottom of the page. And I think that's the rule. I should have looked it up beforehand, but I remember, DC Alcota, there's DS Alcota, there's all those other symbols there. But yeah, I remember, of course, the issue with that, if you don't have everybody that's familiar with that, it's like reading, I guess the more practical explanation of it would be like, reading one of those choose your own adventure books. And it's like, you don't just read it cover to cover. You got to hop around. You got to go to this page and that page. That's kind of what it is. But of course, if you're in a band that doesn't understand that, like I was at one point, we just they had some people that played through it. And then basically the conductor was furious and had to stop us all. And then we started over again. That was in a concert. So that was really embarrassing. But that's my experience with DC Alcota. So there's that kind of one too. So a little bit of music stuff there at the same time. I basically stopped doing that when I went to college there, and I went to English major instead of music there at that point. But I do have that background, and I feel like that's still helpful in some sense. Not just being able to watch Whiplash and understand what they're talking about, but being able to kind of listen to some of his music and use it in these videos. I feel like I gained a good appreciation for it. So I'm a big supporter of people having that background in music and having that exposure to it. I think there's some subjects that probably shouldn't be just the band geek thing. It should be something that maybe more people have more exposure to. But I don't want to go too far down the road there on that. Wild card is leader. Okay, we'll probably do some wild card questions here then, and we'll do that at the same time. But yeah, DC Alcota, that's where that comes from. So we'll do some wild card questions tonight. I do have something for show and tell, but I'll get the first question off before we have that here for tonight. So here we go. First question for the evening: who drove like a lion but was called Tiger? Who drove like a lion but was called Tiger? That's the first one. I think it's a Tiger Electronics thing too. Now that I think about it, but yeah. Hasbro, Parker Brothers. You think they would put the logo more on here? Horn Abbott Limited. Yeah, I don't know, but you get the point there. Yes. So again, the question: who drove like a lion but was called a tiger? That is our first question of the evening. Alrighty. So here's what I got for this today. It's really more of a visual component here. So in conjunction with the episode of Rise of the Field Fillers, I did pick up a copy of the program for the 2004 NASCAR Nextel All-Star Challenge, which, again, done by the late, great Sam Bass. A wonderful composite here. I love the illustration in the moon of all the famous moments from the Winston. Of course, Daryl and Rusty, Davey Allison and Kyle Petty, and of course the pass in the grass there. And really kind of showing the watershed moment that Nextel produced, where it was going from the Winston, which, I still call it that. I still like to say, oh, it's the Winston. You don't have to say it's the All-Star race. But I guess to really compete with baseball or, baseball specifically and having the All-Star game, we, of course, have the All-Star race. And now, of course, it's going through its even more significant rebranding at North Wilkesboro. But yeah, so this is the actual program from the 2004 race. You kind of get a little closer view of the detail on here, but I think the the artwork's very nice there. And Jeff Gordon was running a throwback to the Rainbow Warrior paint scheme in that, so that got a bit featured on here. Of course, Jimmy Johnson, who we just saw almost finish last in the race today, being the primary focus on the cover here for how good he was at Charlotte. And of course, Lowe's was the title sponsor of the track, so the Lowe's car gets front and center there kind of on that. It's also got a great ad for the Coca-Cola Racing family on the back. And back when, you didn't just have Hendrick Motorsports as Coke, you had like drivers from multiple different teams. You got Michael Waltrip, Bobby Labonte, Tony Stewart, Harvick, Sadler, Kyle Petty, Jarrett, Kurt Busch, and I almost said Carl Edwards, Jeff Burton. It would be in 2004, right before Carl Edwards took over in the 99 car. But yeah, let me see if I got some interesting pictures or ads I could show you here at the same time. Let's see. Oh, here you go. You want to see a real young Martin Truex Jr.? Check this out. How about that? It looks like Paul Menard in this shot. But yeah, there you go. You got Earnhardt Jr. takes a chance, or referencing the Chance 2 team, on Martin Truex Jr. Oh, hang on, the crease is a little not in a great spot there. But yeah, a little bit of a different. Let's see the centerfold. Okay, there you go. Yeah, Martin Truex Jr. I think they could definitely win the championship. Truex Jr.'s car owner said with utmost confidence, they're going to have some of the best equipment at their fingertips. Martin can get the job done. He's a rookie in the Busch Series, but no rookie behind the wheel. He has a great idea of what he's trying to accomplish on the racetrack. He has a great sense of patience and also knows when to really push the car. So there you go. Let's see, we got some classic shots here from the Winston itself. Let's see, ads for Ryan Newman. Here we go. We got kind of the, here we go. Here's one of the 84 cars. I think I saw somebody mention here that, I guess Allmendinger did finish last, the 84 car at Dover in 07. So thank you for clearing that up there. But here's the 84 car I was thinking of that also finished last a while back. Kyle Busch, I believe the Spring Atlanta race. He finished last in that car there, or one of them. But you got a real old school Kyle Busch there in the, the 5th or the 6th Hendrick car back then. So you got that deal. Dale Jarrett, Kurt Busch there, of course, older brother there in the car he ultimately won the championship with. And then Jeff Burton, back when he didn't have sponsorship on the 99, and TNT sponsored it to promote the All-Star game in basketball. So there you go. So, the connections with other sports kind of brought up there at the same time. Oh, shoot, right next to it here. I guess you saw this on camera. We got an ad for Andy Hillenberg's Fast Track Racing School here on the other side here. That's what that deal is. So a little bit of a connection to one of the other field fillers. It's too bad a lot of the fillers aren't featured in here. The driver profile one doesn't really show them. I think the only one, we got Derek Cope here in the Arnold Motorsports deal. So at least he made the cut. But we don't really have like Carl Long or any of the other ones here from those teams. But I really enjoyed putting that one together because it also got to talk about some of the mid-pack teams that were kind of challenging some of the field fillers or trying to get enough sponsorship so they could actually kind of run more races. The 23 team that Dave Blaney drove for definitely stood out. Is it shown in here? I don't think it is. I think this one just shows, well, it should be in here because it shows the 500 schemes. No, it does not show Blaney in here. That's interesting. Scott Wimmer, of course, with his good run in the Daytona 500, although he wasn't really much of a factor the first part of that season, unfortunately. Jimmy Spencer there, the Morgan McClure car, after Yoke TV jumped off. Got the Featherlight sponsorship there on this shot here. So some good paint schemes from this, too. There we go. There's a Phoenix Racing car. They had Johnny Benson listed in place of Joe Ruttman, who, of course, had that famous run at Rockingham there, kind of featured in the episode. So some interesting shots in here, and so forth. Let's see. You got past winners of the All-Star race here. Kind of got a good cross section here of drivers from different eras. Davey Allison up to drivers like Dale Jarrett or Jeff Burton. Very interesting. Or I guess those are 600 winners. Jeff Burton didn't win the All-Star race. Yeah, he's supposed to be 600 winners. Okay, hang on. Yeah. Jeff Burton in 1999 and 2001. Yeah, because I think Terry Labonte won the All-Star race in 99, and 01 was Gordon. So yeah, these got to be 600 winners. Interesting. So actually, that goes back even further. Oh wow, those are actually. Here we go. Hey, you want to see a picture? Here's Joe Lee Johnson. Here's the winner of the first World 600 right here. This will actually make a good tie-in for that race as well. I guess this really is like a combination one for. I guess it doesn't make sense if you have races on consecutive weeks to make programs for different races. But you got that there listed at the same time. So yeah, pretty cool to see. Programs are interesting bits of information. Sometimes you get, oh gosh, here we go. Here's something that'll make me feel old again. Here's how about getting one of these Nextel flip phones with the old little radio, the walkie-talkie function on them there. No smartphones back then. How about you get one with a little clamshell case with like your Matt Kenseth, your Jimmy Johnson graphics on it. So there you go. Number 89, yeah, for Joe Lee Johnson, looks like. I thought he had the 66, but I think it should have said 89 in this one. In terms of past 600 winners. Yeah, in case you didn't get a good look at the Joe Lee Johnson picture, there's that again. Yeah, 89 it says on that one. So, yeah. Yeah, there we go. That's pretty hip. Did I mention Death Killer? Yeah, we talked a bit about the Rise of the Field Fillers for sure. Just kind of bring you up to speed there. You can check out a little bit earlier in the video later. But yeah, I talked about the next episode, which is going to be on Mach 1 Incorporated, and I've already done an interview with Larry Gunselman for it. So that's going to be very exciting. I'm very excited about getting that one together. Those of you who are in the $5 and up level, advance access to those videos. And again, those of you who are in the $1 and up level, advance access to videos that I narrate for NASCAR Man, as we did with the Peter Revson video this past week. So again, there's bonus content for that. And I'm also in the process of actually kind of sorting some scripts out and finding some more content for the $10 level to have exclusive videos that you see behind the paywall on the Patreon itself. I have a couple videos in there, including commentary tracks for Days of Thunder and Driven, but I want to kind of add some more stuff to that there as well. So there you go. So there's the program for the 2004 NASCAR Nextel All-Star Challenge. So it was actually, I thought it was kind of clunky at the time, but actually it's not a bad name, and the graphics were fine. But I still like to call it the Winston instead, just for short form purposes there. Going back to the trivia question, I know we didn't answer that yet. Who drove like a lion but was called Tiger? A lot of you got this one. This was indeed Tiger. Tom Pistone. Tom Pistone was the answer. Yeah, Kyle looks like a child there. Exactly, yeah. Different time period there. The youngsters even know what a magazine is. Yeah, there you go. Exactly. But yeah. A lot of you guys got it. Somebody guessed Kirk Gibson. Yeah, there you go. Not Tyler Reddick. Tom Pistone is indeed the correct answer. It looks like Jason Toth, I think. Oh, no, Zachary Leffler. You were the first one on that one. So there you go. Yeah, Chance 2 Motorsports, NASCAR flip phones. Yeah, very old, Matt. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that makes two of us, man. So there you go. Alrighty. Here we go. Next question, folks. What war's soldiers did NASCAR salute in 1991 with Daytona's armed services cars? Let me read that one again. What war's soldiers did NASCAR salute in 1991 with Daytona's armed services cars? Very famous sponsorship deal that they did at Daytona in 1991. What war's soldiers were being honored with that program? Hey there, Racer 10-6-2000. Thank everyone for tuning in here. Just kind of doing the latter part of the show here with the messages on our trivia questions here. Mach 1 is the one you've been waiting for, Beast Metal. Oh, good. I'm glad you're excited about that. Are we Brock heads? Yeah, I don't know. Brock's beards. That works, Dakota Jackson. I don't know. That it seems like that would be something I wouldn't come up. That would be kind of something that you guys would come up. So if you guys have a name that you like for what the group there, I'm open to it there. I couldn't really think of anything. I still like the idea of the last car lane for the trip that the cars go to the garage area. Like if I was going to sponsor something, like I liked sponsoring Brad Perez last year. That was a lot of fun, and he's still really driver I like supporting out there. But yeah, if I was to do something like larger, I'd really get a kick out of sponsoring the entrance to the garage area, and then just so they'd have to drive over the logo on the way in. I think that would be the way. That would be the way to do it. Because then it would just look like the logo on the website with the car going behind the wall. That would be kind of my thinking. So one of these days, we'll see. What wars soldiers did NASCAR salute in 1991 with Daytona's Armed Services car? And of course, the answer is the Persian Gulf War, or Operation Desert Storm, as a lot of you guys said it, and a lot of you guys did indeed get that. Zachary Leffer, looks like you were the first one on that, with that one. Yes, Desert Storm is correct. Just call us the field fillers. Yeah, there you go. That could be it too. All right. We'll do a few more here for tonight. How many laps? Next question. How many laps are run in the IROC event at Daytona? Ooh, here's a deep cut. So think about late 90s. So, I mean, I don't know if the laps changed. I never really thought about looking that up. But how many laps are run in the IROC event at Daytona? Don't look it up. Try to guess it. Glad this camera angle looks better this week. I'm reluctant to adjust it. I looked as big as a house the last couple of weeks here with the way I had this angled, but I think this is better. So I think this will work better here. I have to keep this in mind. I think what I did before is I had my camera to my left, and it didn't show very well. So I think I'm going to just stick with straight on and do that. How many laps are run in the IROC event at Daytona? That's the question. Almost out of code red there. Alrighty. Maybe a Discord account would be nice. I have thought about that. No Tires, Just Gas. I may have that be a perk for the Patreon as well, just to kind of limit the number, just kind of keep it manageable. I know Gluck used to do that, and it sounded like it was pretty popular. I haven't used Discord that much, but I'm sure some of you guys would probably enjoy doing something more back and forth rather than me just blathering on for 2 hours here. So I could do that too, but yeah. How many laps are run in the IROC event at Daytona? The answer is 40. 40 is the correct answer. Matt Cross, yep, you're right. Zachary Leffler, looks like you were the first one on that one. Charles Peterson going for extra points there and listing the different drivers and teams, drivers and divisions of the military represented there. I had a lot of fun. I had a 1991 paint scheme list that I used for NASCAR 99. And I remember I wanted to create, I created my own car, which was also unsponsored. So in my head canon, I was trying to think of another division of the military to put for the car. And we didn't have the Space Force or anything, of course, back then. But I think I put the cavalry because I couldn't remember if the cavalry is a division of the Army or if it's its own separate thing. If you have a soldiers that ride horseback or something. But again, I mean, I don't really know much about the way that works. I'm sure I got if it's one way or the other. But I had fun with that. That was kind of my answer on that. It was a pretty good paint scheme. I got to post it at some point. I had a lot of fun with that. Alrighty. Let's see. Let's see. Let me do this. Here we go. Next question here, folks. What owner earned the nickname Eccentric Genius? What owner earned the nickname Eccentric Genius? Oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah. Those of you guys, 100 miles, yeah, you'd be correct, too. Andrew Hayes, Death Killer, yeah, you got it. Yeah, Zachary is, picking them up, laying them down. The field fillers. There you go. I actually had to re-record it for that portion of the video, the Next Till Open one. I did a different take. One of the takes, it just didn't sound right. I think my voice cracked in it. So there were a couple clips I had to kind of redo. There's also a part where I say Kevin LePage and my voice drops a bit. It's because when I tried saying it, it would like, sometimes if I read a script and I go too high at the end of a sentence, then I hold that note into the next sentence, and then my voice cracks because I can't hold that because I try to run lower. Because then I said, like, it's like, oh, there was a problem with his shows. Then he did this. And it's like, it just doesn't sound right. But that's, a little behind the scenes thing there. What owner earned the nickname Eccentric Genius is our next question. Jack Roush, Smokey Eunuch. Several other ones here. Gotcha, Beast of Metal. Yeah, maybe we'll do something there. We'll see. Ooh, somebody guessed Darwin Ort, Death Killer. There you go. You got going with a deep dive there. What owner earned the nickname Eccentric Genius? Cotton Owens. These are good guesses. These are very good guesses. Alrighty. And the answer is Carl Kiekhofer. Carl Kiekhofer is the correct answer. I don't think anybody got that. Smokey Eunuch sounded right to me. I would have guessed that. Carl Kiekhofer is the correct answer. Need to do a Field Fillers intro over the Sonoma PA system. That'd be great. I'd love to do like a Field Fillers reunion and just like go to a podium and say like, they were the Field Fillers. And then they all come in. It's like, oh, it's Andy Hillenberg. It's Andy Belmont. It's Carl Long. Gosh, that'd be great. It'd be like a variety show. I guess that would probably be it. I was thinking more like a convention, but yeah, probably like a produced show, like a This Is Your Life kind of thing would be kind of fun. I don't know. Maybe we can get Stanton Barrett on board for that. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, Carl Kiekhofer was the correct answer. He's certainly eccentric. Yeah, that's a fair point. But yeah, I got a lot of exciting things I'm working on. Actually, I'm doing a lot of work on 500 Days. I've been catching up on stuff from Las Vegas for that video. So I'm hopeful to kind of get that going too. And I finished another script, which is going to be another driver profile. I was working on that this week. I actually kind of spent a little bit too much time on it, on that. And I kind of got that done. And now I'm kind of working on this other thing with 2001 again, because I want to kind of keep that going. So basically, I mean, from here on, it's going to be kind of going back and forth between, it's not going to be like a whole lot of ones from one series and then like maybe a whole lot from another series. At least I don't think so. He'll probably hop back and forth for a bit, but we'll see how that goes. Carl Kiekhofer was indeed the correct answer to that question. Alrighty. Next question, and don't look it up here. What driver won the most NASCAR Winston Cup championships in the 60s? What driver won the most NASCAR Winston Cup championships in the 60s? That was another kind of fun thing this week, too. Well, I mean, fun depending on who you ask. I actually did jury duty this week. I touched on this in last Sunday's show. And actually got picked. It's only the third time I think I've been called to jury duty. And it's the first time I actually got picked, which was kind of fun. It was, I mean, in a sense there, because I've worked on the opposite side of it. I've grown up in an attorney's family there, or family practice really with that. So I'd experienced, trial prep before, but not that side of it. And I think it was very eye opening. I know a lot of people make jokes about jury duty and saying people trying to get out of it or just not wanting to do it. And I don't want to sound like too Pollyannish about it, because I mean, it is a bit of work. You're really trying to figure out these cases, but I think it's actually a really interesting experience. I don't know if it's been maybe a positive experience for everybody that's had it. Maybe you don't get along with the group you're working with, but we had a good group. We had a good group that kind of that did that, and it was just a 2-day case. Maybe it would have been different if it were a longer case. I don't know, but it was fun. It was a positive experience. So we had that. What driver won the most NASCAR Winston Cup championships in the 60s is the question. Yeah, Charles Peterson's still surprised by the Mercury Outboards guys. Yeah. Then nobody asked if there were any lawyers during voir dire. They did, and I did answer truth. I mean, of course, you have to answer truthfully. You're under penalty of perjury, of course. So yeah, so I mentioned that I'm not an attorney. That's a common misconception. I do have my law degree. I have a JD. I've worked second chair in cases before, but I'm not an attorney. I took the bar exam 3 times, couldn't pass it. And I've thought about maybe going back to it someday. Never say never, but at this point now, certainly with what I do with the website and everything, I don't feel like going radio silent for another summer and taking it again. And especially it's been like a decade since I last took it. So I know the test is a lot different. I actually got a notice recently that was asking if there should be another system to approve attorneys for, to license attorneys. But I don't know. I think the test is definitely designed to keep people out. I don't think it's designed to bring people in at all. But again, I came really close. I was 16 points short the second time I took it. But yeah, I didn't pass it, which is too bad. And it was difficult. And that was really, I really kind of reorganized. It's a long story, but again, it is what it is, at this point here. But again, I don't rule it out. It's I do have that background. I think it helped with my writing, because legal writing, you have to be very concise. I think also, honestly, if I was being really honest about it, and I tried to be, I think it really kind of helped me be interested in doing research and really doing, I feel like a lot of the ways that I write these videos is almost like a statement of facts in a legal case, where you have to break down what the facts are, put them in order, make it something that's understandable, but you're also kind of arguing a little bit. I feel like sometimes I kind of argue something when I'm describing these things. Like they're not 100% objective, but like I'm also kind of trying to make you invested in it, which I think you have to do when you're writing one of these things. So I mean, it was helpful. I mean, I certainly didn't go into it planning it being a writing course. It's absolutely not that. But it just wasn't for me. So I mean, I got tremendous respect for anybody in the legal field. But I did have to mention, I have my law degree, and they still brought me on there. I was juror number 9. So, they asked, is that going to be a problem in being objective in this? And I was like, no, it's not, because I mean, I may understand how the system works a little bit from what I had. I honestly think a lot of legal studies should, I mean, again, I'm getting back on my soapbox again here. Kind of like what I talked about with music earlier. I do think legal studies should be part of just regular curriculum. When I went to law school, I was kind of thinking, how to enter a contract, what it means, what it means when, you get married, and what community property is. These are things that everybody should know. Why is this like a specialized course? Why is this a postgraduate thing? This should be something you should know when you're in middle school. I mean, you always hear about people saying that the educational system should be changed so that people can understand how to fill out their taxes or something like that. I agree. But I think if you had music in the lower years, and then you had legal background when you get a bit older, certainly in high school, when you're going out on your own, or you're taking out loans to go into college, you got to understand what your rights are. You need to have something like that, I think. I don't know. I don't want to go too far down the road, because I know people got strong opinions on that, but that's just me. I think a lot of what I had in that experience was tremendously helpful. But I think it would be even more helpful to other people if they learned it even earlier. And then, if you want to be an attorney, then you got that down the road. So that's kind of where that is too. But I'm glad I have the experience. And I do have my JD. I got the certificate around somewhere. Maybe we'll show it on a show one of these days. But it was a positive experience. I mean, it's unfortunate it didn't go through, but I mean, I take responsibility for that. It just wasn't meant to be, really. And I didn't want to psych myself out of it, again. I thought about maybe just going in there just dry and not studying for it and just see what happened. That's not the way I approached it the other 3 times, but it's like, do I want to spend 3 days doing that? Like, I'm not even sure, but I don't know. Maybe one of these days, we'll see. We'll maybe having fun with it is the thing I missed. And maybe that was the reason it didn't work out. And it would be interesting to see how it would turn out. But again, the law has changed. I mean, again, it's literally been a decade. Like, it's changed so much since then. I don't even know if what I learned would work. I'd probably bring up like something outdated or something. I don't know, but that's just kind of the thing. But I have tremendous respect for anybody in the law. I mean, that does it, and certainly people that have practiced it, because that was my background growing up. I was always told every English major's got to go into law school, and that was my thing. But but that's a whole other thing there. But maybe I don't know if anybody's going to watch a video on that, but there's that part of it there too. But yeah, that's what I take. I think kids should learn music. I think kids should learn law. I think that should be it. I really think they do. I think a lot of conflict that happens comes from a lack of awareness of these things, of things that people need to know. And it's not just being able to think critically, but use the tools you have at your disposal. I mean, I shouldn't go too much further down that road. Anyway, speaking on different subject, what driver won the most NASCAR Winston Cup championships in the 60s is our next question. What driver won the most NASCAR Winston Cup championships in the 60s? That's the question. And the answer is David Pearson. Pearson is the correct answer. Ever thought about doing your own autobiography? Yeah, one of these days, but Kevin, that's you flatter me on that. I don't know if anybody would read it at this point here. But I mean, I'm very fortunate to have had the experiences I've had to this point. I'm trying to really do the most with them, really. I think that's at this point, I'm less interested in trying to, pick up a piece of paper or something like that, and more trying to do something with it. That's kind of been my transition on that. And that's certainly, I think, what this last decade's been. But, there's something, I could do a whole thing where I could talk about, legal experience. Like, another thing I think was really critical part in my life was when I was on the rowing team. I've made some mention of that on this show in the past. And I was in the best shape of my life in the early 2000s. I weighed, like 100 pounds less than I do right now. I was like, I was a sexy beast back then. But that's a different story. So we had a lot of fun doing that. Had some good friends to meet down there in Southern California, waking up at crack of dawn and getting in those boats and stuff like that, and meeting some great people from that too. But maybe that'll, again, is that could be, a video or a book, who knows, but it'd be kind of fun. I wouldn't rule it out, but, maybe when the time is right, that'll be a story for another day there for sure. Let's do a couple more questions here for tonight. So there we go. Let's see. I also used to have hair. I could talk about that. Of course, I was never a big fan of hair. Hair and me have not gotten along very well. I never liked, gelling it or messing with it. So when I started losing my hair in college, I didn't mind. I mean, I had a hairdresser say like, hey, you ever tried Rogaine? I'm like, why? Like, no. And so, there you go. Who became NASCAR Winston Cup champ in a year he drove with a broken left hand? That's actually the question. We might have had this one. I don't know. Who became NASCAR Winston Cup champ in a year he drove with a broken left hand? That's the next question. No! Oh, gosh, you got all the Judge Dredd people in the chat here tonight. Soundtrack to that movie is really good, by the way. I don't know if you ever listened to it in the standalone. Yeah, the jury filler. Yeah, exactly. I like that, Age Gale. Actually, I did a mock trial thing in court, and I was terrible. I didn't object enough. I don't know if I was just shy or it just didn't come quickly. It wasn't quick. Like you gotta just object to everything. Like, I mean, the opposing counsel was just badgering our witness and like saying, and to the point where the witness was getting upset, and it's like, that didn't go well. Like I focused so much attention on doing the opening statement, and then, oh gosh, this is true. This is a real story. I'm telling you this too. I mean, I can't make this stuff up. Like I did the opening statement, and we had to pick our own jury of like friends and stuff that would be like a jury in this for this mock trial thing. And I got halfway through it. I'm like doing my whole rigmarole. And then halfway through, the guy in the middle of the front row starts laughing. He starts laughing like real hard. Like he's just like, he's just busted up. And I'm like, I wasn't trying to be funny, but I guess I was laying it on way too thick, and it was like, it's like, oh, and then this happened, and this happened, and then this happened, and he's just laughing. And I don't know how I kept from laughing, because I mean, I'm the kind of person where somebody starts cracking up, like that's gonna be a problem. Like I'm gonna be like, uh oh, like But I don't know. Maybe I should write something about this one day. But it was an interesting experience. It was interesting. I mean, again, I'm glad I had the experience. I'm glad I had the experience. I didn't aim for it to just be one, but there you go. So the question again here we have: who became NASCAR Winston Cup champ in a year he drove with a broken left hand? I've scared so many viewers away with all these discussions. Look, we're down to 74 viewers here. Although the show has gone kind of long, so that's probably it. I get into all this stuff here about this, and it turns into law chat, and then it turns into rowing chat, and now it's a mess. So there you go. Who became NASCAR Winston Cup champ in a year he drove with a broken left hand? In the meantime, Michael Jensen, thank you so much for the super chat. Had to go food shopping right after the race. Just wanted to say congrats to Gilliland and LaJoy on strong runs today. Yes. Corey currently on the way too early playoff field. Absolutely. Fantastic job for LaJoy. That needs to be mentioned again. He has really come into his own this year, and that's so good to see. We've seen him have good runs at Daytona and try and keep things going, whether it was the 32 car or the 7, or even when he was with BK Racing. But they've really figured something out there this year, and that's good to see. And if we could maybe see him get his first win, he kept his streak going in Atlanta. I'd love to see it. And Gilliland, too. He gained so much attention for that save at Daytona. And, of course, you think back to how good he was at Talladega last year. And then he has a good run like this, like we saw here today, the top 10 finish, or his top 5 at the Indy Road Course, where he almost continued the streak of races on July 31st, having first-time winners. He was very close to keeping that going. But yeah. It looks like we have an official call on technical inspection. Okay, that's fine. We got that call. We'll get that pulled up here in the meantime. The Cup Garage, no issues. Reddick is the winner, and that is it. So we do not have cars to tech inspection. We don't have any new updates beyond that. So again, it will be a Ty Dillon article tonight. Ty Dillon, your last place finisher, and we'll have that for you guys a little later this evening. Yes, thank you again for the heads up on the inspection results. Let me read this again. Who became NASCAR Winston Cup champ in a year he drove with a broken left hand? The answer is indeed, and a few of you got it, Texas Terry Labonte. Terry Labonte. Actually, I have something Terry Labonte related I may use for a show and tell further. I guess we could save that for a Texas race. That'd probably be good. But I'm sure I'm going to forget by the time we do that, because we got Texas isn't going to be... well, we can have Texas for the trucks for Richmond weekend, don't we? I guess I could tie it in for that. We'll see. I'll think about that. Oh, 1995 soundtrack, Beast of Metal for Judge Dredd. Absolutely. I don't know if 2012 even had music. Movies don't seem to have music anymore, or at least not memorable music. I mean, I remember going to one, I'd want to pull it up on YouTube or find the album. Like, I mean, I haven't felt that way in a movie in a while, in a long while. So, yeah. How about we do one more question here tonight for those of you here sticking around here. We'll do one more just to wrap up, because I know it's been a long show here, and the race was already an eternity here before this. So here we go. Not that one. That one's too easy. Not that one. All right, here we go. Here's a good one. Last question for the night, folks. Here we go. What was the fastest production car being made in America in 1950? What was the fastest production car being made in America in 1950? Yeah, you love it when your favorite content creators ramble about stuff. Well, I can certainly do that. But yeah. Rockbeard PI, I love that. Yeah. like I say, I'm very fortunate to have had the experiences I've had. I think the important thing to do with that is you try to make it so that other people can either learn from it or experience it or something that helps people. I don't want to just do things and then just do it for my own sake and not share it with anybody. So it's nice to have this outlet to do that. I think that helps. So yeah, maybe we'll do that more. And I don't think it's gonna be every show, but because I think at that point you got people like, hey, wait a minute, what's who's we all of a sudden have a double disqualification again like Pocono last year, and then who knows. What was the fastest production car being made in America in 1950? 1950. 1950. Hudson Hornet, Oldsmobile, Doc Hudson, Chrysler New Yorker, Lincoln, Ford Model T. Yeah, not 1915, 1950, 50. It's the correct year, or the correct answer. Alrighty. What was the fastest production car being made in America in 1950? All right, here we go. Last answer for the evening, folks. Fastest production car made in America, 1950, the Oldsmobile Rocket 88. Garbage plate. Looks like you got it. You guessed 88. Maybe guessed Oldsmobile. You got that too. 611 Hornet and Racer 106 2000. Looks like you got Oldsmobile as well. But the 88 is the specific model. Garbage plate. You were the one that... oh, no. Maserati 9. You mentioned it too. Strike that. You also got it. You got it before garbage plate there. So there you go. He was not the Nash. Not quite. So there we are. So that will do it tonight, folks, for our show. Congratulations to Tyler Reddick for his win today at Circuit of the Americas. I think congratulations, really, to the sport in general for a weekend of pretty entertaining road course racing. I think the broadcast is now the one that needs to kind of make the adjustments to stop showing dogs and children and start showing us the race. But maybe that'll come in time. One can only hope. But we'll find out. So yeah, that'll do it for our show this evening. Our last place article is going to be on Ty Dillon. That'll be up on lastcar.info later tonight. The articles for both the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series are already on there. And in the meantime, patreon.com/lastcaronbrock is the Patreon. @lastcaronbrock is my Twitter feed. Our next show is going to be next Sunday after the combination of Richmond for the Xfinity and the Cup Series and Texas for the Truck Series, if memory serves. So we're going to have a two-track discussion there really next week. So we'll come back here about 15 minutes after the conclusion of the Cup Series race, and we'll discuss it back again here. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Have a safe week, everyone, and I'll see you all next week.